welcome to today's webinar brought to you by MACF and Florida Makes. I'm your host, Sherry Reeves, along with Christian Davison. Today is May 14th, 2020, and we are starting the program at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Today's topic, the FFCRA Explained. I would like to introduce today's speaker, Wendy Sellers, better known as the HR Lady. For the first time in history, all small employers are required to provide paid sick leave and paid FMLA leave effective April 1st, 2020. As MACF's expert, Wendy is here today to update you on several changes from her last webinar 8 weeks ago. A few housekeeping notes. As a participant, your audio will be in listen-only mode, using your phone or computer, whichever is more convenient. Additionally, you will have the opportunity to ask your questions using the question window. This is a live webinar event which is being recorded. A link to the recording will be provided to you within a few days. Now, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Wendy.
Thanks, Sherry. Hey, everybody. This is Wendy Sellers, the HR Lady. We did this, I can't believe it's been 8 weeks ago, and I'm not going to say a lot has changed, but a lot has been clarified. I think in the beginning there was maybe a dozen questions and answers that are now posted online by the Department of Labor, and as of a couple days ago, I believe we're at like 93. And so we have to keep going back every few days because the Department of Labor adds more questions and answers, but it is extremely confusing. And we're gonna quickly go, jump in here. Please, if you have any questions, make sure that you post them in the question window, and I will do my best to keep an eye on them and answer the questions, although many of your questions may be answered in the next slide. So with that said, let's get started here. If you do not know anything about the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, here are the basics. So for short, it's the FFCRA, and it's effective April 1st through the end of this year. So as everybody on the phone knows right now, we don't know when this is going to clear up, if there's going to be another illness that comes from coronavirus. And so right now they do have it through the end of December. Will that be expanded? Only time will tell. It certainly will not be shortened. There are several parts of the law that you need to be aware of as an employer with less than 500 employees. It is the number one and confusing thing is the expanded FMLA protection. Most employers in regular times, if you have less than 50 employees, you don't have to worry about the FMLA, meaning your employee goes out on leave for whatever reason, they just follow your policy and they're not protected per se for the FMLA up to 12 weeks over the course of a year. Now they will be, but just for the 6 reasons that we are going to define. Some of this time is paid, some of it is 100% paid, some of it is 2/3 paid. We'll go over that. And then there's also paid FMLA/sick leave for childcare, aka I'll call it homeschooling because it's easiest to say it that way. Although it's not just homeschooling, there could be situations where there's a disabled child that, it's more than just school, excuse me. And then there are tax credits as well, which we will go over. Oops. So I just updated this presentation the other day for another group that I did this for. So again, jumping back in, if you have 500 employees or less, you must comply with this. This is the first time you're hearing about it, you're pretty late into the game and you can get fined. So you need to quickly catch up, put all your postings out, make sure your employees are aware of their rights, and then back pay anybody who you accidentally didn't pay because you weren't aware of this. So in regular times, FMLA is only 50 employees or more. Now it's, anywhere from 1 employee to 500. You have 503, you're clear. If it's just you, you're fine as well also. You wouldn't have to necessarily pay yourself, but you can use it for the tax credit. So this expands FMLA for up to 12 weeks. It also, this is brand new. And again, this is only for these 6 reasons that we're going to go over. It expands it to new hires. If anybody on the call knows anything about regular FMLA, you have to work with the company for a year before you get protected. And I'm using some loose terminology here because we could be here forever explaining all this. The year is basically 12 months, but it's based on hours as well. So new hires here is 30 calendar days. So if you had somebody that you put on your payroll 31 days ago, they are now eligible for this specific COVID-19 6 reasons of FMLA leave. Paid sick leave is capped at 80 hours, and we're going to go into that a lot more. This is the part that's really confusing. I was just on a call this morning with a client that was confused about this as well, and so I've tried to lay it out the best that I can visually so that you can see that there is some overlap between the sick leave and the FMLA. And then also, hopefully everybody gets this, but if somebody's working, even if they're working from home, it's not leave, they're working. They get paid their regular time and a half if it's necessary. So there are a few exceptions, and I just want to tell you to be very, very, very careful with these exceptions, because while there is specific information that the Department of Labor listed that said, okay, here are the exceptions, they're not saying, okay, you have to send us information and then we're going to approve it. My concern is you may think that you're exempt, and then 3, 6, 12 months later, a lawsuit comes out and on a similar company, and then it turns out they're not exempt, and now they come back and get you that said, hey, you were supposed to pay all these people. And so if at all possible, go above and beyond and give your employees the FFCRA paid leave. You're going to get that money back, so to speak, and we'll talk about that as well. But the only exceptions are, so if you are a small employer with under 25 employees, you do not have to hold a job open for someone who's on extended child care. So that's one exception right there. So the extended child care is they cannot work at home and homeschool their child. They cannot work at home at all because of their job. If you have 26 employees, that's fine. They get paid for those up to 12, you'll see how much, up to 12 weeks. And then you have to hold their job back and give it back to them after that if they come back. If you're under 25 employees, you don't have to hold that job. The next exception is for the child care portion only. Again, I'm just going to refer to this as homeschool because I don't want it to be confused with I'm taking care of a sick child. That's 2 different things. So there are exceptions for employers under 50 employees, and it's about financials. It's not necessarily about head count, but you have to prove that it's a hardship. And there's really a lot of gray area out there right now. So make sure if it's truly a hardship that you document that so you don't have to pay them. The other option is that you can lay individuals off because you can't afford to pay them, and then they can go collect unemployment. But I also caution on that, because if you're only laying off people with kids, that is completely discriminatory and you will get yourself in trouble. And then there are also healthcare providers are exempt too. I don't think we have any healthcare providers on the call, but if we do, this is the information for the healthcare providers. The thing to note for healthcare providers as well is they can be exempt, but they don't have to be. They can choose to pay, and that's fine. So I'm going to just scoot back here for a minute so I could show you these links, and we're going to go to them. In previous trainings, what I've done is, take screenshots of this information, but literally things keep changing by the day, every couple days. So now I'm just bringing you right to the website. And so what we want to do here is, I'm going to click here and show you, let me see here, if I could open my screen here, show you where this brings you. So this brings you to the Department of Labor website, and this is the main link that's going to take you to a gazillion other links. And there's a lot of information, and it's very confusing. When we get done with this call today, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, And if you have any questions whatsoever, just shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I'm on there like 90 times a day, especially during this COVID. And then I could respond to you there. I've also posted a lot of information on my LinkedIn that you can just go ahead and stalk my account, and maybe the information's already there. And then finally, I do have a lot of forms that either I've created or I've gotten from somewhere that somebody else has created and everybody's sharing them, that I could email you. I can message you right through LinkedIn some forms and trackers as well. I have a really great tracker that a payroll company provided that I can give you, that you're going to need to track every single hour that you pay. And I can guarantee you there will be audits. So you want to make sure your employees are filling out a form saying, yes, this is legit. I'm sick, somebody in my family's sick, my child's out of school. They're verifying that information on a form, and then you're documenting it on a tracker, an Excel sheet, so that you can use it for payroll. And then hopefully this will never happen, but if you get audited, and we don't know what's going to happen, that you can prove that no, this was my employee taking this. I didn't just steal this money from the government, because that's basically what it is. So going here, these are fact sheets. These are really great information. I'll click on the employee one just so you can see it. But there's basically a summary of, okay, what is the FFCRA and what are my rights as an employee? But keep in mind, this one is focused on the employee, so it doesn't go into the nitty-gritty as much on the employer side. But it does. It's pretty good information. It lays out the reasons why, which we're going to go into, and then even more information here. So I don't want to overwhelm you with that yet. And then there's a similar one. There's one in Spanish as well, and then there's a similar one for the employer. And so it does expand on that a lot. And so I encourage you that if you're confused at all about the FFCR, even after this presentation today, to go through all of this information and try to clear it up, or feel free to just shoot me a message and I'll try my best to respond. This link right here, under the questions and answers, this is going to be the holy grail for you right here. This has all the questions and answers that the Department of Labor has come up with, and I think there's like 93 of them as of today. And then they've even gone even further, and they've grouped all the questions into sections. And so this wasn't here 2 weeks ago. So I have to say, the Department of Labor, specifically for the FFCRA, has done an amazing job at answering questions and clarifying information with the very little time that they have putting this together. So we're going to go over some question and answers today. So we're not going to sit here and read 93 of them. I just picked some that I keep getting the most questions on, so that you can see where to go. And then again, there's more just FLSA, which is wage and hour, and then FMLA questions and answers related to COVID. If you have not done so yet, you have to download a poster. And if you have more than English in your organization, download the relevant language as well. And this is mandatory. It has to be in your break room with all those other posters that I know drive everybody crazy. But you have to put this in your break room. And if you have anybody working from home, I recommend that if you have an intranet, you put it on there. I recommend you even go a further step and put it, send it in an email. And yes, it does open up Pandora's box that says, oh, now my employees know they can take time off, but that is the purpose of it. I would rather your employees take time off, even if they may not be telling the 100% truth, take the time off and stay home, even though they're getting paid, than infect somebody or infect your customer, because there will then be another lawsuit. So they have these in many different languages right here. If I don't believe anybody on this call is a federal employee, but if you are, you have a little bit different information. So if you're a federal employer, not a contractor, a federal employer like an agency, you know that, and it's just a different poster right here. Pretty much mostly everything I'm going to go over is the same if you're public if you're federal or if you're private, except for the federal and the public agencies, they don't get the tax credit. So they just pay out of their budget and that's it. More information even down here. This is a pretty decent webinar as well. PowerPoint slide that goes over everything, similar to what we're going to go over today, but it's pretty basic, and then they have it in Spanish. So I'm going to leave this here so we can jump back and go back into the presentation. We already went to that one. Okay, so these are the 6 reasons, the only 6 reasons that somebody in your workplace would be able to take leave and get paid for it, and then you, the employer, would take that off of your tax payment. And we'll get into that down the road. So just hang on if you have any of those questions. So 6 reasons. And again, this is if they're unable to work. Number 1, and it's important to know that you have to know the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You need to know that 1 is this, 2 is this, 3 is this. Why? Because in the questions and answers, they refer to a lot of like, okay, number 5. Number 5 is the child care, so the homeschooling, so to speak. And you have to know which ones are which. Number 1 in the beginning of all this was not, it was very confusing, but it basically has been cleared up now that if anybody, if you have a stay at home or safer at home order, this is what it's for. So whether it's a mandate or a suggestion, the safer at home, the quarantine. I'm not sure where everybody is calling from today. I believe since this is a Florida Makes call, everybody's probably in Florida, but you may have a, you know, a site not in Florida. So the reason I say that is Florida is basically open except for some parts of South Florida, and then some specific cities may not have opened yet either. And so this is, for the most part, has been lifted, but it still may not have been lifted for, I don't know if Miami opened yet or not. I haven't checked on that this week, but for parts of Florida or like the Keys are closed as well. Number 2 and number 3 are related. So number 2 is if the employees, let me back up here a minute. 1, 2, and 3 is about the employee. So the employee is subject to an order. The employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine related to COVID. And the employee, or number 3, the employee is experiencing symptoms. Number 2 was used a lot a couple weeks ago because you couldn't get a medical diagnosis. So their doctors were just telling them through telemed, stay home and self-quarantine. We're getting less of that now, again, depending on where you're located. Not everybody has testing and not everybody has transportation to go to get testing. So number 3 is one that we're really seeing a lot more now, which is the employees has symptoms, called their doctor, went to their doctor, and they said, we want you to go get tested, or, you know, so 2 and 3 might be together. But again, that's the employee themselves. Number 4 is if the employee is caring for a family member, and family member has been defined as well. It was going back and forth in the beginning, but it's basically the same thing as FMLA. And there are questions and answers on that as well, specifically. But if it's, say, your neighbor's kid that you always take care of, that's not going to be acceptable unless you have custody of that child or something like that. Number 5 is the big one, which is the child care. So your employee can't come to work because they have to take care of their child. And so we'll get into that. And number 6 is not yet defined. So if anybody's telling you it's number 6, that's the reason they're out, they're absolutely not telling the truth because it is not yet defined. And let's hope that that does not get defined. However, there have been quite a few of news you know, sites right now that there are other illnesses coming out of COVID. And so this is probably going to be the catch-all for that. So just be cautious. Don't accuse anybody of lying, but we don't really know what's going on right now. All right, so moving forward, what I've tried to do is break this down and overlap the sick leave part and the FMLA leave part. So there's two different sub-laws, so to speak, in the FFCRA. One is paid sick leave, one is expanded FMLA leave that may be paid. So remember I told you you have to know what the numbers are, what the order is, and this is the reason why. So for numbers 1, 2, 3, and 6, so the employee is experiencing something, they're sick or they're under a quarantine order, they get up to 80 hours within the first 2 weeks paid at 100%. And then you, the employer, get this as a tax credit. Most of you, well, many of you in the call may use a payroll service, and some of you may not. Some of you may do payroll yourself and calculate it yourself in your office. Either way, generally speaking, you're submitting a quarterly 941 payment, which is Social Security and Medicare. What you're going to do is you're going to track these 80 hours, up to 80 hours, and I'll explain that in a minute as well. And then you're going to deduct their hourly wages off of this payment. So this is why it's important. This is another reason why many small companies, or even companies who just were not financially stable, said we can't afford to do this, and they laid people off, because depending on, well, we just had a quarterly tax submission. So in the beginning of this, you know, a few companies may have made it like maybe a week, but now we're another 3, maybe 2 months out. I don't even know where we're at in the calendar year right now, but we're about 2 months out of making another tax payment. And so you would have to float that this whole time. And if you don't have income coming in, well, that's where you would possibly consider going to unemployment instead. I want to read this fine print here because it's the same for the rest of the reasons. So time taken is FMLA protected for these first 2 weeks. It does not need to be paid after the 10 days, 80 hours. And so can you pay it? Can you give them more FMLA protection? If you're sure, absolutely, you can do that. If you're under 50 employees, you don't have to, because you don't have FMLA. If you're over 50 employees, FMLA kicks in regularly anyways. The other thing that I've seen coming out of this is other conditions that an employee might have been triggered or affected by COVID, whether if they had it or not, or just the stress. And so we're not going to get too much into that right now, but please just feel free to shoot me a message on LinkedIn if you have any specific questions for your employees. So this is the easy one. 1, 2, 3, and 6. The employee's experiencing something. You're going to have them document that. I can get you a form if you want one. The first up to 80 hours within the 2 weeks is paid at 100% of their regular pay, and then you get a tax credit. Why do we say up to? Well, if the employee is only scheduled 25 hours and 25 hours, then they only get 50. If they're scheduled 20 and 30, then they're going to get an average. And there are specific calculations. If anybody has fluctuating work weeks, there are specific calculations in the Q&A on that website that I just showed you. So make sure that you go there to get that information. Okay, moving on. Number 4, so I'm going to call this homeschooling. I'm sorry, this isn't the homeschooling one, that's the next one. The employee is caring for an individual who might be sick. So somebody that they're legally responsible for has been told to self-quarantine, either because they can't get to the doctor, whatever it might be, or that they're waiting for a medical diagnosis. It's usually a son, daughter, spouse, parent in loco. There's a few other exceptions which are defined by the FMLA laws. So it's very similar. Family member sick, they're taking care of them, you get the credit. Only difference here is it's reduced to 67%, so 2/3 of their pay. And again, this is only for the first 10 days. So the first 2 weeks, which is generally 10 days. If you work 7 days a week, it might be 14 days. I had a question yesterday from somebody who wanted proof of the 2 weeks. You know, where does it say the first 2 weeks? And it is in the questions and answers, but it is difficult to find. I found it in about 7 Q&A, and then I also found it in one of those fact sheets, the first fact sheet that I showed you. And so I'm just going to go back to that real quick. Right, and in these fact sheets here, it is defined as well that it specifically says 2 weeks back to back. So it's not, okay, I'm going to get paid this week, and then I'm going to go back to work, and then I'm going to use my second week of 4 weeks from now. No, it's 2 weeks back to back, and they have clarified that. You just have to really look through the questions and answers and get that. So the next one is the one where it gets a little crazy. This is the homeschooling one. And for those folks that have a child that's normally in daycare, for example, and they're not at a school age, this is for yours as well. So basically, childcare is unavailable. Note that in Florida, not all daycares close. So you know, your employer could really, well, you guys are the employers. The employers could really push this to say, no, your daycare is not closed. I would just be very careful, because who really wants to send their child to a daycare when there's only 4 other kids there, or there's all these kids there and they might be sick. But in Florida specifically, daycares did not close. And I know this because I have a daycare client and they did not close, but almost everybody yanked their kids from school. So this would really be up to you, the employer, if you're going to comply with this. And again, they have to provide information to prove that they're in this situation. The question and answers, which again is up to 93 questions, I think right now, there is very specific information there too of what you can ask them. And I put it together on a form. So again, connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll give it to you if you don't already have it. So this is similar to the other two. However, it's much longer. So the child care, the homeschooling, so to speak, is 1 to 12 weeks of paid leave at 67%. The first 2 weeks are sick leave. The 3 to 12 are called expanded FMLA leave. If you're only looking at the website and seeing expanded FMLA leave, it makes it seem like you don't got to pay the first 2 weeks. And you don't under the expanded FMLA, but you do under the paid sick leave. And so that's why I put this visual together, because it's a lot easier to understand. The first 2 weeks, again, just like the other reason, have to be back to back. And then after that, they can be intermittent. So what I'm seeing happening is you have several adults in the household. And, you know, maybe the adults are taking turns going to work versus taking care of their children. And you're just going to need to work that out with your employees if it's not a hardship for you. And if you're under 50 employers or employees, you might be able to consider it a hardship. My rule of thumb is go above and beyond during all of this, because there are going to be major lawsuits that are going to be coming out of this. And I do not want you to be in one of them. So going above and beyond, even for the employees who drive you crazy and who you think might be lying to you, make sure that you're doing the right thing so you stay off the Department of Labor's target list. Now down here, you'll see here for the child care, you can get a tax credit up to 60 days. And it's actually 10 days under the sick leave part, and then 50 days under the FMLA part. And so I've broken it out a little bit more right here as well. So these are the caps for the tax credit. If you have highly paid employees, they're not going to get paid that much. But if you have low paid employees, you're going to be able to really help them out right now. And so you'll get a copy of this PDF if you'd like it. Sherry, I don't know if you're going to be sending it out, but I could send it to you and you could send it out. I'm fine with that. And then you can look at all this information. So again, the caps are listed here. The cap for the employee who is experiencing something is the highest. it's $511 per day, and it's an aggregate of $5,110. And then the family care, so they're taking care of somebody in their family who's qualified to be a family member because they're sick or maybe experiencing something. It drops down to $200 a day. Remember, these two right here, it's only up to 80 hours. So I believe my next slide shows another breakout as well. And then this one is the most expensive one, which is the child care, so the homeschool or the daycare reason. Also $200 per day, because remember, you're reducing their pay to 67% for this one and this one, but it's up to $12,000 in aggregate. So that could be a lot of money that you may not have because you're losing business and you don't have the money to front. It never mind to even take away from the taxes, but you don't have the money to front. So a full-time employee is eligible for up to 12 weeks of leave at 40 hours a week, and then the part-time is eligible too. And remember that this is also for new hires. All of this is for new hires for 30 days, if they've been within the company for 30 days. Let's see. And then this is also the childcare one, is one that you might be exempt from. What if you don't deal with FMLA? Basically, what you need to know about FMLA is that you can't fire them for taking the leave. And so for the childcare one is protected as well, and that's going to be painful to some folks. So here is, I just try to do a layout, just a brief layout of, okay, how much is this really going to cost me? Let's just say you have an employee that makes $12 an hour at an 8-hour day. That's $96 an hour. This is obviously before taxes. The cap is actually $200 a day or $511 per day, depending on what reason you're using. And so you're not coming anywhere near that. And then that would be up to $480 a week, $960 over 2 weeks. The cap's $2,000 or $5,110. You're not coming anywhere near that. But again, if you don't have the money, that's still going to be painful. And then if you added it all up for the 12 weeks of childcare, the cap is $12,000, but you're probably not going to come anywhere near that. One other thing I wanted to say, I just mentioned something here that made me remember. So it's 80, the sick leave, those 80 hours, they can only use it once. So they can't say reason number 1, I'm using 80 hours. Reason number 2, I'm using 80 hours. Reason number 3, I'm using 80 hours. It's 80 hours, that's it. And they either use it or lose it within 2 weeks back to back. If they get sick again or somebody else is sick again, unfortunately, it's unfortunate for them, but the employer is not going to have to pay for it. We already went over these posters, so I'm going to just quickly bypass this screen here. And then again, go over some definitions, and I have a handful of questions and answers to review. But if you have any specific questions, please make sure you put them into the questions and I will answer them if we have time. So paid sick leave means paid leave under the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. The state of Florida does not have mandatory paid sick leave for anything else, nor will it this year anyways. If you're in any other states, you may have that as well, and so there may be an overlap. If for the states that there is an overlap, this comes first. So you can't force them to use their accrued sick leave or anything else that they were already granted. You have to use this one first. And then expanded family and medical leave, this is for the child care reason, only unless they already qualify for FMLA for some other reason. The other thing that I wanted to mention is this does not extend FMLA. So if somebody's already on FMLA and they're at 11 weeks and they now get sick, they still only get 12 weeks for their year, whatever your year is. So this is one of the questions that I've been asked a lot. It's question number 6, and it's about overtime hours. So must it be included? The answer is yes, but it's really no, because you're capped at 80 hours over a 2-week period. So sure, if they work different schedules every week, and in week 1 they work 50 hours and then in week 2 they only work 20 hours, you are going to have to pay them the 50, the 40 hours regular, the 10 hours overtime for week 1, and then drop down to those other 20 hours. So the answer is yes, but you know, it's only within 2 weeks. If they're regular work hours, overtime is not going to really be included, because you're going to, it might be included for the first week, but you're going to max out on the second week. Hopefully that makes sense. Another question is the regular rate of pay. I know some manufacturers and warehouses have fluctuating work, maybe with pieces, you know, commissions, stuff like that. So there are calculations on the question and answer website. And so make sure that whatever you normally use for the regular rate of pay is what you're going to be using for this as well. And hopefully whatever you normally use is actually legally compliant. The next question, question number 16, is what documents do I need to give my employer to get paid sick leave? And so this is where, this is the question that they're saying, okay, employers, this is what you can ask for. And I have, like I said, I have a form that does this. And so if you want it, just let me know. Otherwise, you can just copy this, go to question 16, copy it, paste it into a form and make it your own. But it's their name, their date for which they're requesting leave, the reason for leave, a statement that you're unable to work because of the reason, which I've outlined 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, so they're forced to choose one, and they don't write in their own. If you're subject to a quarantine order, you should, you know, refer to that order. Honestly, this was used a lot in the beginning. Everybody knows what the orders are now, so don't come down too hard on them. And then if they are based on doctor's advice, and give that information. Before I go to the next screen, because there's more information, look at this right here. The law says they can do this orally, so you cannot force your employee to fill out a form. What I've been doing is asking them to fill out the form. Not everyone's going to have a printer. Not everyone's going to have email at home. Not everyone's going to, you know, even have a computer. So if they're unable to do that and they leave me a voicemail or I talk to them, what I do is I put it in writing, and hopefully you have an email for them, or just put it in their file or in a COVID file that says, you know, based on our phone call at this date on this time, blah, blah, blah. And you have to document it, because I'm telling you, there's going to be audits and you do not want to be caught in the audit. This is the rest of the question and answer for question 16, and it relates specifically to their child care. So the child care, not because they're sick, because they don't have school. And so they have to, you know, give the information. Again, just because you take care of your cousin, if they're not legally your child, so to speak, under the law and under taxes, then they're not going to qualify. Can you take care of your cousin while you're taking care of your own kid? Sure, but your child is the one that's going to qualify. And they do have very specific information, and they refer to some other sites, such as the Family and Medical Leave site, on who is considered a child. The rest of the question 16 again is about certification. So this is some gray area here, but if your employee was already sick before with something, whether you knew or not, and now their doctor's saying they can't come in because they are at high risk, you know, they should have, what I'm telling people is have them fill out the FMLA forms, which are all online and they're free, and have them fill that out even though you don't qualify for regular FMLA. And that way you have what is called a medical certification. Question number 18 was a popular one as well. What does it mean to be unable to work? So if somebody's working at home, they're working, you're paying them, end of story. If they're unable to work because their job requires them to be in the warehouse or the manufacturing plant, and you're not open or there's still a order, then they can't work, end of story. What you're going to start seeing, I suspect, if you haven't already, and we're getting towards the end of this because school's going to be out soon in many areas, is that the employee tried to work remotely and take care of their child, and they just are not able to. What the Department of Labor is asking that you employers do is to, be flexible, let them work at night, let them work in the day, let them take a 3-hour lunch break so they can help their child, so that we can figure this all out and get everybody paid. Otherwise, you're going to have to terminate them and they're going to go on unemployment. In many states, and Florida is one of them, the unemployment chargeability is going to the employer's account still. Florida did not stop that. Many other states did. Florida did not. So the more people you put on unemployment, the higher your unemployment taxes are going to go, and that's going to be for a couple of years. So it's not always advantageous to put people on unemployment if you have work, because it's going to be really difficult to get them off of that unemployment, because they're going to be enjoying that up to $21 an hour right now. Well, the people that make less than that will be enjoying it. The other ones don't want to go on it. Moving on to, I think we already covered this about telework. So if they're working remotely, they're not entitled to any of this leave. They just get paid for their hours worked. Now, maybe they're going to be working and you're going to reduce their hours because they've asked you to. So the only one that they're going to get paid for, that they have to work less because they're taking care of their child during homeschool. One of the questions that did just come out, and it's at the end of the Q&A list, I want to say it's like 90, is what about the summer? So the summer's coming up. Is this going to count for the summer? And the Department of Labor has said no, it is not going to count for the summer. So in fact, let me go right there so you can see it. Sorry, this can get you dizzy here for a minute. Okay. So this question here was the one saying like, hey, they started out working fine at home and now they're saying they can't. The Department of Labor is saying, because they have to take care of their child who's also home with them, the Department of Labor is saying, be flexible. Do what you can to be flexible. If your company, however, can simply not be flexible with that position, you don't have to be, but they are asking that you be flexible. And then I believe, yep, it was the last question, is the question about the summer. So paid sick leave and emergency family medical leave are not going to be able to be used during the summer. So it's just for regular school or regular daycare, if daycare maybe before school, after school. So if the school is closed for the summer, then the employee is not going to get paid for this. They're going to have to find another option to take care of their child, whatever they normally do for the summer. And this is going to be very difficult. I caution everybody on this call to be kind and put yourself in their shoes, because many parents are not going to want to send their children to summer camp. Summer camps may not even be open, and they're going to have no way to take care of their child this summer in fear that the child's going to get sick. So I envision more information coming out of this. All right, let's move forward to the next question. Again, I'm not going to go over this in detail, but this is where you can find out who is a son or daughter. There's links here. When am I eligible for paid sick leave to self-quarantine? Your healthcare provider has to give you that suggestion. And then here's the next question. If you decide to do it on your own, like, I'm not feeling good, I'm just going to self-quarantine, you could totally do that, but that you're not going to get paid for it. And then the employer, you guys on the phone, need to make a decision if you're going to let them use regular vacation, regular sick, unpaid, if you're going to, hold them accountable for missing work, if you're going to terminate them. That's totally up to you. Just, again, put yourself in their situation. And then this one I already mentioned, we don't 100% have anything on this yet of what the other condition is, the number 6, but I've seen a few other a few lawyers post some things that this is coming, because if you're watching the news at all, you can see some strange conditions are happening with children where they didn't think many children could get this. And so there may be an answer to that soon. And then number 86 is paid sick leave. I mentioned this. This is an addition. So the PSL and the EPSL is an addition to any other form of unpaid or paid leave that you have. You can't double dip. You can't force them to use their vacation and then you get the tax credit. And you can't force them to use their vacation or sick time first. This comes first. Okay, moving on so that I can wrap this up. I know we're coming at the 45-minute mark here, and I want to make sure if anybody has any questions that you do submit those questions. So essential workers, most people on this call, I think, are in the manufacturing industry. And so you already know what essential or non-essential is, but the list is here. And it may be, if you have more locations than just Florida, different states, cities, counties may have specific mandates. So making sure that if you are outside of just Florida or you are one county, that you know what is required. I have a whole other webinar that's an hour and a half long, specifically on, okay, what do we do when we return to work? And I cannot cover that all in here, but what I could tell you is that most states, I went through 12 states this morning for a client who had locations, manufacturing location in 12 different states, and every state is different. They can create their own rules, but most states are simply referring to the CDC and regular OSHA. But I did find a few states this morning when I was doing research that the governor of that state has mandated masks. The governor of Florida has basically referred to the CDC. Everything on the CDC's website is guidance. See this term right here? Guidance. Even the OSHA website is guidance. Am I taking it as guidance? Heck no, I'm taking it as go above and beyond, because there's going to be lawsuits out of this. And so this is a great website to know. If you just, Google CDC COVID, you're going to end up here somewhere, but you can see on the left-hand side, or even on the top here, but on the left-hand side, you can scroll right down to community, schools, and workplaces, and then go even further into guidance for businesses and employers. And this is the page that you're going to end up at. And there's a lot of information. There's even more information specifically for manufacturing, for meat, for healthcare. Some states have their own guidance as well. And then on this main page here, you'll see over here is guidance from OSHA. Oh, sorry, it'll take a minute to open, but I believe it's page 7 or 9 is where you want to go to and say, okay, I need to go to this page. And again, they update these things, so I just refer to the link so that if I download it and then I go to it again, there's another page there. But if you go to, we'll scroll right down here. So this is where you start getting develop an infectious response plan. So this starts talking about the workplace. So there's all this information right here, but again, this is all guidance. What my suggestion is to look to see what the guidance of CDC is and take it. There's one thing that I found last week about the building ventilation system. So if you have fans in your workplace, or you have air conditioning units, which most of us do in Florida, that you may want to put some kind of filter in there to make sure that it's not being spread. And then also, even if you have fans in an office, to make sure that they're only being directed at the individual who has a fan. But if that individual coughs, there goes the possible virus over their shoulder to someone else. So This is a great website to come to and make sure that you're doing the right thing. We don't have time to go into all that. These are the 3 things that I recommend at a minimum. Number 1 is document, and it's where they come in every day before they come into the workplace, and they document that they don't have coronavirus, they don't have any symptoms, and then they do it the next day, the next day, the next day. Many of my clients, especially in manufacturing, are doing this with non-contact thermometers, and they're doing it up to 3 times a day to certify. Is it required in the state of Florida? No. Is it a very good idea? Yes. And then, of course, the cloth face coverings, is it required? No, it's not in the state of Florida. In some states it is. I do have some self-certification forms for this, and so if you would like them, just message me through LinkedIn and I will drop them right into your LinkedIn Messenger. Wrapping this up here, just talking about layoffs and unemployment, I briefly mentioned this. Not advocating to say, hey, you know, FFCRA is going to cost you a lot of money, it's hard to manage. I'm not advocating for that, but if you have to, and you just don't have work coming in, you don't have the money, and there's no way you're going to be able to pay all this, be very careful of who you lay off and who you keep, making sure it's not discriminatory, making sure that you are being, you know, considerate and doing the right thing. Document everything. Document. I can't say it enough. Document everything, even if it's just an email or, you know, a piece of paper that says on at this time, on this date, I talked to so and so, and this is what we agreed on, because this will come back to bite you. And what I mean by this is, so for many of you, you've probably realized it by now that low-paid employees are making a really good money off of unemployment right now. Whether you agree with that or not is really not up to discussion right now. What it is some of them may not want to come back because of that. So you need to document when you're calling them back. And then if they say, no, I'm not coming back, you need to document that. Best form of documentation is to email them, hey, John, I need you to come back on Monday. We're starting back to work. Please confirm. If they don't answer, then obviously give them a phone call, because not everybody checks their emails. And then if they say, no, I'm not coming back, then you document that again in an email or some kind of memo that says you're not coming back. And then you upload that to the unemployment site on the employer side so that they stop getting unemployment. Are they going to stop immediately? I have no idea. I don't know how well versed or how well staffed the unemployment agency is to stop that. My final thing on the unemployment is you're going to need to make a decision on as an employer, that say you go through all that and then the employer says, okay, now employee says, okay, I'm ready, I'll come back now. You need to make the decision to say, yeah, I'll take them or I won't. We all know it's hard to find good people. And right now it's very hard because we didn't have the qualified staff. And now we not only don't have the qualified staff, we don't even have the unqualified staff because they're on unemployment. And so think before you make judgments that say is something like, oh, that person's a jerk and I'm not hiring them back, because we're right back where we were 2 months ago of not having qualified staff. So with that, I'll get off my soapbox there and I will open it up to any questions and answers. If anybody has any questions. I know there's not that many people on the call. I don't see any questions in the box. Sherry or Christian, do you see anything?
Hi, Wendy. Yes, there is
No,
one
I
question
do not.
I see. What healthcare providers are exempt?
Sure. There's actually I don't know what number it is, but it is specifically addressed in here somewhere. So I will find it. It is a very large list. So it's pretty much, let me see if I can find it here. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I do have a couple healthcare providers that were all exempt, even though they decided to stay open. So it was null. And then one did use it that was like an MRI because nobody was coming in. So I don't know if I could find it on here, but if I find it, what I'll do is whoever asked that question, if you could message me on LinkedIn or just at my email, wendy@thehrlady.com. I will find it for you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Any other questions?
And I have that info I can send you to. Yes, there is another one. If an employee gets paid 2 weeks for COVID-19 quarantine, let's say $2,000, can you actually get that back from subtracting the $2,000 from 941 tax?
Yes, you just don't submit it. And I have a Excel tracker that I can give you as well. And it's not mine. I got it from a payroll company. But yes, you basically don't submit it and then you record it. Now, what I don't know yet is if they came up with a special 941 form for you to do that. I'm assuming they did, but I don't do payroll, so I kind of stayed out of that. But yes, you get it back by not submitting it.
Wendy, this is a follow-up to that question. I use third-party payroll. When I ask for credit, they said they have no idea how to subtract that. It's sure payroll.
Fire them. No, I'm just kidding. If you have maybe an accountant that can help you, they're going to be able to do it. But yeah, you have to find that answer and do it. If your payroll company doesn't do, a lot of payroll companies that I know have created all these portals and everything to do it, but see if you can get in touch with an accountant that can help you. I'm sure you have an accountant. And I've seen a lot of information on the treasury.gov website about that as well.
Thank you. And Wendy, in your dealing with small all the way up to large size manufacturing companies, have you found cost-effective ways for these companies to take their employee temperatures as they're coming in for their shifts?
Most of my clients that are doing it are, I'm not sure where they got it, but they all got like it's basically like a temperature gun, and they're doing non-contact now. And so as they're coming in, they're either having them, depending on the weather, having them under a tent outside the facility or coming in one at a time so that people aren't hovering in the same area. It's basically before they come in. Now, technically, you have to pay them for this time. So if they're coming in and you're taking their temperature, making them sign the forms, and then they have a temperature, you still got to pay them for the time, which is unfortunate because now they got to drive back home or however they got there. The other thing that I've seen is, this is particular in Florida, and then if you have anybody who is in the states where it's snowing right now, we have the opposite. If they're coming in and they had to walk to work or they had to, whatever, it's hot out, they may already have a high temperature. So you might ask them to come in and sit down for a few minutes in the air conditioning before you take it. The opposite is happening up in the north, is where they actually are sick, but because it's cold out, their temperature is not being rated correctly, and then they come in and they're sick. So my advice is, no matter where you are, have them come in and making sure that their body temperature is at a regular. And how are you going to do that? It's unless you have a medical doctor or nurse on staff, it's very difficult. But I think what OSHA is going to be looking for, and then with OSHA, your workers' comp insurance is going to be looking for the fact that you've tried and that you did everything you can to protect your employees and your customers.
Wendy, if an employee refuses to have their temperature taken, legally, are you able to force them to do it? Is that a fireable offense? Okay.
Yeah, it's a fireable offense if you if this is a mandatory policy that you've created from today or X date till whenever, until further notice. This is part of their employment. If they refuse to do it, you can definitely fire them. I would definitely make sure that you call it gross misconduct, because they may want to try to get fired to get unemployment. So if they go to unemployment, you make sure whoever's checking your unemployment claims is on top of that, so that you can say, no, we have work, they refuse to follow the policies. So it's not that they are poorly performing, they gross misconduct that refuse to follow this policy.
Thank you. Another question going in a different direction. What recommendations do you have about break rooms and people eating their lunch together?
So my recommendation is, and whoever asked the question about healthcare provider, I just found it. It's 56 is the question and answer. So regarding the break room, again, in the state of Florida and in many states, they're not saying you have to do anything. That OSHA, the CDC guidelines are 6 feet apart, spread, so stagger the lunches, let them eat outside, making sure that everything is wiped down several times a day. There's a lot of information on the CDC website as well. And so definitely, I know people that are some of my clients used to be 2 shifts and now they're like 4 shifts because they're all staggered so that people's lunch breaks and how many people can be in the workplace and in the break room, or heck, even in the restroom at the same time. Do you have to do this by law in the state of Florida? No. Should you? Yes. Any other questions?
That is all I'm seeing for right now. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to type them into the question portal at this time.
Yeah, and then what I'm showing on the screen right now is I'm on the the CDC website, and there's a lot of information under the employer part, and so it has all information here, and you could be on this site for days because you just keep clicking, it goes, you did another page, another page, another page. But there's a lot of information right here. It even talks about health checks and health screenings, and so there's a guide right here. Again, all of this is guidance, not mandatory. But I'm already, I'm in contact with a lot of lawyers, and they're already seeing lawsuits all over the country. Are the lawsuits going to go through? Who knows? We don't know. This is but the moral of this, in my opinion, is do the right thing, even if your employees are driving you crazy. Do the right thing, because we definitely don't want your employees to get sick, because if they're all sick, you're not going to have employees, and it's not only that, is you're going to end up in the news too. So there's a lot of information here about separating sick employees, disinfecting surfaces. Oh, I can't talk right now. All the way down to information. There's more information down here about pinpointing who should be in charge of all this. One of the final things that I would like to say, because I know we're over time here, is if you haven't already created some kind of committee to deal with all this, you should, and make sure it's not just all management. Make sure it's good old regular employees, because listen, our employees don't listen to us, but they'll listen to their buddies. So make sure all those people are represented well on that committee, so everybody knows why we're doing what we're doing, and it's to protect them. All right.
Well, we'd like to thank. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, we'd like to thank you, Wendy, for your time today and for your many years of experience in HR. We'd also once again like to thank Florida Makes for their continued support of Florida manufacturers. We'd like to thank you for your participation in today's webinar. And if you would like more information about MACF, please check out our website at www.macf.biz. Look for next week's live webinar. It's going to be a little bit different. It's with Access Manufacturing next Thursday, May 21st from 3 to 4 p.m. And as you exit the webinar, we're seeking your feedback on how to improve these webinars and to better meet the needs of the topics of value to you. Please watch for upcoming webinars through MACF and Florida Makes. I bid you a good day and stay well.